The scene opens with a shaky, unsteady camera, capturing a chaotic atmosphere. Faded echoes of muffled punches and stifled screams fill the air, setting a tone of imminent peril. In the center of this turmoil, a young man sits bound to a chair, blood staining his torn clothes as he struggles to breathe. His heavy, labored breaths punctuate the silence, each exhale a reminder of his dire situation. In the background, urgent voices in Russian argue over the ransom demand, their words laced with cold calculation and greed. "How much will this one fetch?" one demands, while another retorts sharply. Their conversation reveals an air of detachment, as if they believe their captive is nothing more than an ordinary pawn. This young man is none other than Ryuji Takeda. Despite being the son of one of the most influential Yakuza bosses, Ryuji was raised far from the shadow of criminality. From an early age, he was trained in the art of combat and strategic thinking, skills honed meticulously, even as he deliberately avoided the treacherous world of organized crime. His eyes, filled with a quiet determination, betray the hint of an intellect that is both astute and calculating. Unbeknownst to his captors, their miscalculation is monumental. They believe they have secured a commoner ripe for extortion, completely unaware of the legacy and prowess that Ryuji possesses. Prepare yourself for an unfolding tale of deception, danger, and unexpected courage. You cannot miss what comes next. Subscribe and follow as this story unravels, echoes a chilling promise that leaves the audience eager for more. In this moment of uncertainty and impending chaos, every heartbeat echoes the inevitable clash of fate and determination. The stage is set for a journey that will test the limits of loyalty, strength, and destiny. A saga awaits. Ryuji Takeda's day had started like any other, a blend of routine classes and quiet contemplation of a future unburdened by his family's notorious legacy. Yet, as dusk began to settle, the familiar streets of the city transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and uncertainty. Ryuji found himself walking down a narrow, dimly lit alley, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of his studies and the promise of a peaceful evening. Unbeknownst to him, fate had charted a darker course. Out of the darkness, figures emerged with startling speed and precision. In a heartbeat, Ryuji was surrounded by men whose faces were obscured by the low brim of their hats and the glare of their cold, calculating eyes. Before he could register the shock, a heavy hand clamped over his mouth and another forcefully yanked him into the depths of the alley. The sudden ambush left him struggling for breath as fear and confusion gripped his mind. The assailants moved with a coordinated efficiency that betrayed extensive planning. Their leader, a towering man with a scar cutting across his left cheek and eyes that burned with ruthless intent, signaled his men with terse commands. This was Sergei Petrov, a notorious figure in the criminal underworld, known for his merciless methods and unyielding determination. His reputation was built on cold-blooded violence and an unwavering belief that money could buy anything, even human lives. As Ryuji was roughly forced into a waiting vehicle, his heart pounded with disbelief. The kidnappers assumed him to be nothing more than an ordinary student, an insignificant target whose family would be desperate enough to pay an exorbitant ransom. Their plan was clear: capture a high-value hostage and use him as a bargaining chip in a game of extortion. The irony of the situation was not lost on the silent tension that filled the vehicle, where every passenger was acutely aware that they were dealing with a mistake they could not afford to repeat. Inside the cramped space of the van, Ryuji's mind raced as he tried to comprehend the enormity of his predicament. The harsh lighting and the ever-present scent of diesel created an atmosphere of dread. Even as his instincts screamed for him to fight back, he recognized the futility of resistance in the face of such overwhelming force. Meanwhile, Sergei's calm demeanor and sharp directives over the radio set the tone for the operation, his voice devoid of any trace of hesitation or compassion. Every moment of the abduction was measured and calculated. The kidnappers, acting on their preconceived notions, failed to notice the subtle glimmer of intelligence in Ryuji's eyes, a silent promise of potential retribution. As the van sped away from the familiar streets into an uncertain future, the night itself seemed to hold its breath, aware that an ordinary case of abduction was about to reveal layers far deeper than anyone could have imagined. In the confines of that moving prison, Ryuji's thoughts oscillated between terror and a resolute calm. His mind, trained to calculate every risk, quickly assessed the situation with unnerving clarity. He acknowledged that his captors were overconfident in their ability to control him, oblivious to the hidden potential that lay dormant beneath his seemingly ordinary exterior. This miscalculation, though unintentional on their part, would prove to be a critical flaw in their operation. Each passing moment in the cramped van further solidified Ryuji's determination to survive and overturn the dynamics of power in his favor. Outside, the night whispered of danger and deceit as the van merged onto a desolate road. Shadows danced along the pavement, while distant sirens wailed, a grim reminder that the underworld's reach was both vast and relentless. In that quiet moment, the kidnappers maintained a silent confidence, unaware that every calculated step they took would lead them deeper into a labyrinth from which there was no easy escape. The tension was palpable, charged with the certainty that soon, the full measure of Ryuji's true capabilities would come into play. With the night as their accomplice, the van raced toward an unknown destination, each second laden with the promise of impending chaos. The abduction had only just begun. Dark fate awaited, and terror loomed. Bound in a dimly lit room that reeked of damp concrete and fear, Ryuji Takeda sat with a calm that belied the torment he was enduring. His body ached from the relentless abuse, yet his eyes maintained an icy focus, betraying neither pain nor panic. The kidnappers, convinced that their prize was a simple, unsuspecting student, did not anticipate the inner strength that now emanated from him. Even as rough hands pressed against him and harsh words slithered in the stale air, Ryuji's mind remained a fortress of quiet determination. Under the intermittent glare of a flickering light, a single captor named Dmitri, whose eyes were sharp and observant, began to notice subtle discrepancies in Ryuji's demeanor. While his companions hurled threats and brandished crude instruments of torture, Dmitri observed the young man's measured responses. Every agonizing spasm and pained whimper was deliberate, as if Ryuji was weighing his reactions before they emerged. Dmitri's curiosity grew with each passing moment, and a quiet suspicion formed that this captive was not merely a frightened student, but someone of far greater consequence. The tension in the room thickened when one of the captors muttered in hushed Russian, "Isn't there something familiar about him?" The word Takeda slipped from his lips, and a heavy silence fell over the group. For an instant, the room seemed to shrink as the significance of that name resonated among them. It was a name that carried weight and history, linked to a notorious lineage that commanded both respect and fear. Their meticulously planned scheme for an ordinary hostage suddenly teetered on the brink of collapse. Despite the pain and humiliation, Ryuji maintained his composure. Each lash, every insult, only deepened the contrast between his physical suffering and the serene calculation in his eyes. He listened intently as Dmitri's voice, laced with disbelief, questioned, "The name Takeda, could it be?" These murmurs, barely audible over the clamor of cruelty, signified a dawning realization that they had grievously misjudged their victim. In that grim chamber, as echoes of muffled threats reverberated off cold walls, the captors began to waver. Their initial confidence was undermined by the possibility that Ryuji was not an insignificant pawn, but a man whose identity could upend their entire operation. Every second of enduring torment served to solidify Ryuji's internal resolve. He understood that the revelation of his true heritage was both a setback and an unexpected advantage. With each agonizing moment, his silence was a calculated act, a prelude to a countermeasure that had not yet been revealed. The oppressive darkness seemed to pulse with the promise of impending change, and Dmitri's furtive glances betrayed an inner conflict. In that suffocating atmosphere, the realization struck. They had underestimated not only the strength of a body built for discipline, but the formidable spirit of a Takeda. And in that realization, the balance of power began to shift imperceptibly, setting the stage for consequences that would soon ripple far beyond the confines of this desolate room. As the oppressive darkness pressed in around them, the realization that they had grossly underestimated their captive sent ripples of fear and uncertainty through the group. Each captor's eyes darted around the room, as if searching for an escape from the weight of their mistake. The future of their plan, once so confidently secured, now hung in a precarious balance. In that suffocating moment, the truth was clear. The name Takeda was more than a mere label. It was a legacy, and one that would not be so easily ignored. Realizing the gravity of their error, the captors exchanged uneasy looks, each silently questioning the wisdom of their initial judgment. Ryuji's stoic endurance was a stark contrast to the erratic cruelty exhibited by his tormentors. His unwavering gaze, even in the midst of pain, whispered of a hidden fortitude and a destiny far removed from the ordinary. Each calculated breath and measured reaction served as a reminder that he was not simply a victim, but a man whose lineage and resolve defied the very nature of his captor's brutal intentions. The air was thick with the ominous promise of retribution. Every silent second magnified the peril and possibility of revenge inevitably. In Japan, the day had barely begun when Hiroshi Takeda received news that would shatter the calm facade of his controlled empire. Hiroshi, the formidable and respected head of the Yakuza, was known for his icy composure and ruthless efficiency. Yet nothing could have prepared him for the abrupt notification of his son Ryuji's abduction. The message arrived through a discreet channel, laden with urgency and the unmistakable undertone of betrayal. Hiroshi's heart pounded in time with the clattering of ancient traditions and the harsh reality of modern criminality. The news ignited a fury within him, one that burned with the intensity of 1,000 unresolved grudges. As he stood in his spacious, dimly lit office adorned with symbols of power and legacy, his mind raced through decades of honor and violence. Every memory of his son's tentative steps into adulthood collided with the present horror, stirring a potent cocktail of paternal love and calculated vengeance. Without a word, Hiroshi's eyes hardened into an expression that left no doubt. This was an affront that demanded immediate retribution. Summoning his most trusted advisors, Hiroshi orchestrated a plan with a meticulous precision characteristic of his storied past. He convened a secret meeting with his top lieutenants in a room hidden behind layers of reinforced walls and guarded by the most loyal enforcers. In that clandestine gathering, every whispered command and pointed gesture underscored the severity of the situation. The message was unequivocal. The abduction of Ryuji was not merely a personal tragedy, it was a deliberate challenge to the Takeda legacy. As plans unfurled, Hiroshi dispatched messages across his sprawling network. The call to arms was swift and resolute. His best men were mobilized with an urgency that rivaled the fiercest of storms. Under the cloak of night and the watchful eyes of Tokyo's neon skyline, the wheels of retribution began to turn. Experienced veterans of countless skirmishes were tasked with tracking down the culprits, their hearts steeled by the promise of vengeance and the honor of the family name. Outside, the pulse of the city thrummed with an undercurrent of tension. Rumors spread like wildfire through the narrow streets and shadowed alleys, each whisper adding to the growing chorus of apprehension. Hiroshi's network, with its intricate web of informants and loyal servants, worked tirelessly to trace every lead. The promise of retribution was not merely a distant threat, it was an imminent reality that loomed over the underworld like a dark specter. In a secluded safehouse, Hiroshi's lieutenants gathered around a large wooden table, maps and dossiers strewn before them. The room buzzed with a mixture of urgency and strategic planning. Every detail was scrutinized, every potential threat assessed with the cold logic of those accustomed to living on the edge. There was no room for error. Each moment that ticked by was a reminder that time was of the essence, and that Ryuji's life hung precariously in the balance. Hiroshi's plan was clear and uncompromising. Rescue his son, eliminate the traitors responsible, and send a resounding message to any who dared undermine the Takeda name. With his mind as sharp as a well-forged blade, Hiroshi issued orders that would soon reverberate across continents. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the Yakuza's relentless force began its covert march towards the heart of the impending conflict. Every command given, every movement initiated, resonated with a sense of destiny that transcended mere criminal retribution. Hiroshi's thoughts were not clouded by sentimentality. They were instead a calculated determination, forged in the fires of honor. In his mind, the abduction of Ryuji represented not only a personal affront, but a potential spark to ignite a larger conflict that had been simmering in the shadows of the criminal underworld. For Hiroshi, this was a call to reassert dominance, to remind both friend and foe alike that the Takeda legacy was not to be trifled with. Within the heart of the city, amidst neon glows and whispered rumors, Hiroshi's resolve solidified. Every silent step echoed his determination to reclaim honor and rescue Ryuji, forging an unbreakable bond of vengeance and legacy. His orders resonated as iron decrees. In the gloomy confines of his captivity, Ryuji Takeda's mind raced not only with pain, but with a calculated resolve to turn the situation to his advantage. Every bruise and every cut on his body served as a reminder of the precarious balance between suffering and survival, and he knew that his captor's underestimation of him would soon be their undoing. With deliberate slowness, he began to manipulate the situation in ways that his tormentors could never anticipate. Over the harrowing hours, Ryuji observed every movement and gesture of his captors with meticulous attention, noting the subtle cues that betrayed their inner uncertainties. Among the captors, one figure in particular, Ivan, stood out. His shifting eyes and restless demeanor hinted at doubts about their leader, Sergei. While Sergei issued orders with an unwavering tone, Ivan's gaze lingered on every misstep and every inconsistency in his command, as if searching for weakness. Recognizing this, Ryuji seized the opportunity to instill doubt among them. In moments of brief respite, he engaged in hushed dialogue that questioned the solidity of Sergei's decisions. His voice, though weakened by exhaustion, carried a subtle authority that made even the most skeptical captor pause and reflect on the inconsistencies of their plan. During a quiet moment when the group gathered, Ryuji softly remarked that perhaps Sergei's overconfidence was not strength, but a dangerous flaw. Ivan, already perturbed by subtle hints, began to voice his concerns more openly, questioning the reliability of their leader's plans and decisions. The room's atmosphere shifted noticeably, as doubt spread like a slow-burning fire among the captors, each glance and murmured comment deepening the divide. Under the oppressive weight of emerging distrust, Sergei's commands began to falter, his voice wavering as the foundation of his authority was slowly undermined. Amid this growing disarray, Ryuji maintained an appearance of resigned compliance, even as his inner resolve strengthened with each passing moment. Every casual comment and subtle suggestion was designed to chip away at the unity that had bound the captors together, a strategy that was as ingenious as it was risky. The seeds of doubt that Ryuji planted blossomed quickly into open rebellion, and Ivan's increasingly bold challenges to Sergei's authority further intensified the unrest. In this volatile environment, every whispered word, every furtive glance, contributed to a growing atmosphere of mistrust that threatened to fracture their ranks. Ryuji observed all this silently, his calculating mind cataloging each moment of dissent and each sign of emerging conflict. Though his body remained confined by chains, his spirit soared free as he orchestrated a rebellion within the confines of his captors' minds. Every calculated remark, every slight insinuation, was a deliberate move in a dangerous game that pitted his wit against the brutal force of his captors. In the midst of this internal conflict, the disintegration of their unity became apparent, and the once disciplined group began to splinter under the weight of suspicion. Ivan's defiance grew bolder with each passing minute as he openly challenged Sergei, forcing the group to confront the emerging fractures within their ranks. Meanwhile, Ryuji's subtle maneuvers continued uninterrupted. Every whispered comment, a move that deepened the internal schism and bought him valuable time. The calculated discord served not only to delay any further progress by the captors, but also to shatter the illusion of a unified front. Ryuji's inner calculations were precise. He measured each response, each reaction, ensuring that the seeds of discord he planted would flourish into a full-blown mutiny. Despite the chaos he orchestrated, Ryuji maintained a facade of quiet submission, his outward demeanor belying the fierce rebellion he was engineering from within. Each calculated moment, every strategic word he uttered, was a step toward dismantling the captor's solidarity and forging a path to his eventual escape. The tension in the room, already simmering, now reached a critical point where any further dissent might explode into outright revolt. Ryuji, though physically weakened and bound, found strength in the chaos he was fomenting, each moment of internal strife further solidifying his plan. In that charged silence, his eyes held the promise of liberation, and every breath was a silent oath to reclaim his freedom. Soon the seeds of discord would bear fruit, and Ryuji's silent rebellion would become the catalyst for his ultimate escape. The game had begun. Hiroshi Takeda's meticulously planned operation had now reached a crucial juncture. Under the cover of darkness and shrouded by the relentless hum of a bustling metropolis, Hiroshi and his elite team finally arrived in Moscow. The crisp air, laced with the bitter tang of impending winter, contrasted sharply with the steely determination etched on the faces of the men disembarking from their private aircraft. Their arrival was marked by quiet menace and the unspoken promise of swift retribution. The team, composed of seasoned operatives hardened by years of covert warfare, moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Clad in dark, tailored attire that concealed both their identities and lethal capabilities, they navigated the labyrinthine streets with calculated ease. Every step was deliberate, every glance purposeful. They were a force that commanded respect and instilled fear. Their singular objective was clear: to locate the clandestine cell where Ryuji Takeda was being held captive and pave the way for his imminent rescue. In a narrow, winding back alley, illuminated solely by the flickering glow of distant neon signs, the team rendezvoused with a trusted Russian informant known only as Mikhail. A man of few words and many secrets, Mikhail had long served as a vital link between the shadowy worlds of organized crime and state intelligence. His weathered face, etched with scars of a tumultuous past, belied a keen intellect and unyielding loyalty. It was Mikhail who possessed the critical information that could tilt the balance of power in favor of the Takeda legacy. In a hushed, measured tone, Mikhail revealed the location of the secret compound. "It lies within an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city," he whispered, his voice carrying a tension that underscored the gravity of his message. "The compound is fortified and heavily guarded. Its concrete walls hide secrets as dangerous as the men who believe themselves invincible," he continued. Each word painted a vivid picture of a foreboding stronghold where despair and violence intermingled, a fitting stage for the impending confrontation. Hiroshi listened intently, his steely gaze narrowing as he absorbed every detail. The informant's revelations were not only a confirmation of the cell's whereabouts, but also an insight into the sophisticated security measures employed by the kidnappers. With each piece of information, the stakes grew higher, and the margin for error diminished significantly. Hiroshi's mind raced as he recalibrated the operation, determined that no obstacle would prevent him from reclaiming his son. Immediately, Hiroshi ordered his men to mobilize without delay. The team divided into specialized units, each assigned a critical role in the rescue mission. One unit would secure a perimeter around the industrial complex, while another would breach the compound to locate Ryuji immediately. The coordination among the operatives was flawless, reflecting years of discipline and unwavering loyalty to the Takeda name. The atmosphere was charged with the anticipation of a looming battle that promised to upend the delicate balance of the criminal underworld. As the specialized units advanced toward the target, Moscow itself seemed to pulse with a restless energy. The sprawling city, with its labyrinthine streets and shadowed corners, teemed with both life and hidden danger. Every shadow and every quiet corner held the potential for unforeseen peril, amplifying the tension that gripped the team. Yet within the focused minds of Hiroshi and his operatives, there was only one resolute thought: the rescue of Ryuji Takeda. The night deepened, and with it the tension grew ever more palpable as every step toward the compound weighed heavily on the hearts of the operatives. Every moment was charged with anticipation as the meticulously laid plans were about to be put to the ultimate test. In that charged silence, the stage was set for an explosive confrontation that would soon upend the fragile equilibrium of the criminal underworld. The meticulously laid plans were about to be put to the test, and the resurgent spirit of the Takeda legacy loomed large over the impending battle. With the new intelligence, Hiroshi's team advanced swiftly toward the compound. Every command and heartbeat resonated with the promise of retribution, leaving no doubt that the storm of battle was imminent. The final confrontation was now absolutely unavoidable. In the oppressive gloom of the compound, Ryuji's mind raced with a single, urgent thought: escape. The hours of silent observation and careful manipulation had prepared him for this pivotal moment. Seizing the opportunity, he focused his energy on provoking Sergei in a calculated manner, determined to force the hand of his captors and create a window for his escape. As the room fell into a temporary lull, Ryuji's eyes locked with those of Sergei. With a steady, defiant tone, he uttered a challenge that cut through the tension. "You believe you control me, but you know nothing of power," he declared, his voice trembling with restrained fury. Sergei's eyes narrowed, his expression twisting into a mix of disbelief and irritation. In that charged moment, The air seemed to vibrate with imminent conflict. The provocation worked exactly as Ryuji had hoped. Sergei's anger flared, and his harsh words spilled out like a torrent. "How you dare defy me?" he roared, stepping forward with a threatening gesture. The confrontation was inevitable now. In the ensuing chaos, Ryuji struck with a speed born of desperation and honed skill. He darted forward, catching Sergei off balance with a swift blow to his jaw. The force of the strike resonated in the silence that followed, and for a brief moment, it appeared as if time itself had paused. Seizing the distraction, Ryuji twisted away and made a break for freedom. The sudden burst of movement startled the nearby henchman, who scrambled to respond. Ryuji knew that every second was crucial. With a series of rapid, precise movements, he engaged the closest attackers in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Each punch, kick, and maneuver was executed with a calm efficiency that belied the tumult of the moment. His training, long suppressed under the weight of captivity, now surged forth as he neutralized one opponent after another. In the melee, the clang of fists against flesh and the grunts of exertion filled the air. Ryuji's senses sharpened as adrenaline coursed through his veins. With every strike, he pushed the henchman further back, creating space to maneuver. His mind calculated each move with relentless precision, turning the tide of the skirmish in his favor. The once confident attackers now faltered, their coordinated efforts disrupted by the unexpected ferocity of their captive, turned combatant. As Ryuji's escape plan unfolded, his gaze fell upon a discarded weapon lying in the chaos, a cold, gleaming handgun that had been left carelessly near a toppled table. Recognizing the critical advantage it could provide, he lunged toward it with unyielding determination. With deft precision, he snatched the weapon from its resting place, his fingers closing around the cold metal as if it were an extension of his own will. The acquisition of the gun marked a turning point in the conflict, as Ryuji now held not only his own fate in his hands, but a means to assert dominance. Yet the situation demanded further boldness. Amidst the confusion, one henchman, Ivan, whose earlier doubts had begun to surface, found himself isolated from the group. Sensing an opportunity to deepen the internal discord and secure an additional bargaining chip, Ryuji swiftly overpowered him. In one decisive move, he subdued Ivan and forced him to his knees. The captive's eyes widened in disbelief as Ryuji, now armed and emboldened, declared him a hostage. "You will be the leverage," Ryuji said, his voice cold and unwavering, a reminder that even those who seem loyal can be turned against their masters. The act of taking Ivan as a hostage was more than a tactical maneuver. It was a symbolic assertion of Ryuji's reclamation of power. As the chaos of the confrontation reached its zenith, the sound of struggle and defiance echoed through the compound's corridors. Ryuji's movements remained fluid and calculated, every action designed to exploit the fractures within his captor's unity. With Sergei momentarily stunned by the audacity of his defiance and the remaining henchmen reeling from the rapid turn of events, Ryuji knew that the path to freedom was now open. Heart pounding and senses heightened, he cast one final glance at the disoriented form of Sergei before vanishing into the labyrinthine corridors of the compound. Each step carried him. The night had turned bitterly cold as Hiroshi Takeda's elite Yakuza unit advanced steadily on the compound where Ryuji was held. Under the cloak of darkness, the city of Moscow bore silent witness to the orchestrated precision of the Takeda force as they moved in unison toward their target. The air was thick with anticipation, and every member of the team knew that failure was not an option. Hiroshi's men had split into multiple teams, each assigned a critical role in the operation. One unit quietly sealed off all possible escape routes, ensuring that no fleeing captor could evade the inevitable confrontation. Another team, armed with state-of-the-art weaponry and decades of combat experience, prepared to breach the compound's reinforced walls. The calculated silence was shattered only by the soft rustle of uniforms and the low murmur of orders exchanged in hushed tones. At the edge of the compound, the Yakuza operatives formed a tight perimeter. Their eyes, cold and unwavering, scanned every darkened window and shadowed corner of the structure. With the precision of a seasoned predator, they timed their assault to coincide with the moment of internal disarray created by Ryuji's escape. As the signal was given, the first shot rang out, a terse report that shattered the night's stillness. Inside, chaos erupted as Russian captors scrambled to mount a defense. The sound of gunfire echoed through the compound's cold corridors, mingling with shouts in Russian and the heavy thud of boots on concrete. The Yakuza advanced relentlessly, their coordinated tactics overwhelming the unprepared guards. In a matter of moments, they had encircled the building, sealing off any chance of external reinforcements. Amid the chaos, Sergei Petrov realized his options were rapidly diminishing. With Ryuji at his side as a makeshift shield, he made a desperate bid for freedom. Clutching the captive tightly, Sergei burst through a side exit, hoping to use Ryuji as a human barrier against the onslaught of determined Yakuza fighters. However, his plan was doomed from the start. As he staggered into the open, the calculated precision of the Takeda operatives came into full effect. A volley of gunfire rained down upon him, forcing him to press Ryuji against his side. The sound of bullets slicing through the cold night air mingled with the cries of pain and disbelief from both Russian henchmen and Yakuza fighters alike. In that desperate moment, Ryuji's fate hung in a precarious balance. Every movement was a test of resolve and strategy. The Yakuza, with their cold efficiency, pressed forward without hesitation. They moved as one, eliminating any resistance with a mixture of brute force and meticulous planning. Amid the hail of bullets and the roar of suppressed explosions, the compound was gradually overtaken. The once formidable fortress of the kidnappers now seemed vulnerable under the relentless siege of the Takeda legacy. Hiroshi's presence loomed over the battlefield as he surveyed the chaos from a vantage point. His eyes, sharp and unforgiving, missed nothing. Every enemy fallen, every shot fired, was noted as he orchestrated his men's movements with a calm authority that belied the turmoil of the battle. His personal vendetta had merged with the cold calculation of a seasoned strategist. As the confrontation intensified, a palpable tension filled the night. The compound's corridors became battlegrounds, with Russian guards and Yakuza operatives clashing in fierce skirmishes. Amid this violent tableau, Sergei's desperate attempt to escape with Ryuji as his shield only accelerated his downfall. His retreat became a chaotic dash through narrow passageways, punctuated by the relentless barrage of Yakuza fire. In the end, the siege was as swift as it was brutal. The coordinated efforts of Hiroshi's men left little room for Sergei's survival. The compound, once a stronghold of criminal enterprise, fell into disarray as the Yakuza secured every exit and corner. The dark night bore witness to a violent collision of worlds, a fierce display of power that would forever mark the legacy of the Takeda name. As the final echoes of the firefight faded into the cold Moscow night, it was clear that the tide had irrevocably turned. The siege had not only trapped the remaining Russian forces. After the fierce siege and chaotic battle that had shaken the compound, silence fell over the blood-stained corridors. In the dim glow of flickering emergency lights, Sergei Petrov stumbled into a secluded chamber, his mind reeling from the collapse of his plans. Panting and wounded, he clutched his side as he searched desperately for any sign of his captive. There, in the midst of the turmoil, he found himself face to face with Ryuji Takeda, a revelation that struck him like a thunderbolt. In that instant, a distinctive tattoo on Ryuji's wrist and the poised, deliberate manner in which he moved confirmed what Sergei had long suspected. Sergei's mind raced as he pieced together the unmistakable clues, the insignia of the Takeda family, the precision in Ryuji's combat, and the calm intensity in his eyes all told a story that could not be ignored. It was clear that his captive was not an ordinary victim, but the heir to a notorious Yakuza dynasty, a man whose lineage carried immense power and an inescapable destiny. As this realization sank in, Sergei felt the weight of his error. The gravity of underestimating the Takeda legacy bore down on him, and he understood that his own fate was now sealed by the hand of destiny. Meanwhile, Ryuji, having endured unspeakable hardships in captivity, sensed the shifting tide within the compound. His keen mind registered the tremors of fear and uncertainty among his captors as whispers of the Takeda name began to spread. The revelation of his true identity had fractured the illusion of control that his enemies once possessed. Amid the chaos, Ryuji remained composed, his every thought a testament to the rigorous training and unwavering determination instilled in him since childhood. In that charged moment, Ryuji reached a crossroads. The opportunity for a violent reprisal had presented itself, yet he chose a path that defied the expectations of both his captors and the ruthless cycle of vengeance. Standing tall amid the disarray, he spoke with a measured voice that resonated with resolve. Death would be a relief, but living in fear is the true punishment. His words, simple yet profound, broke the silence and sowed confusion among those who had believed that retribution was inevitable. Sergei, now visibly trembling, could only gape in disbelief. The full truth of the Takeda legacy was laid bare before him, shattering the arrogance that had fueled his criminal ambitions. His eyes, wide with dawning terror, reflected the collapse of his plans and the certainty of his impending downfall. In that moment, the room was filled with a heavy finality, as if the very air acknowledged that the scales of fate had irrevocably tipped. As the echoes of Ryuji's declaration faded, a solemn calm descended upon the chamber. The remaining captors, stripped of their confidence, realized that the confrontation had altered the rules of engagement forever. Ryuji's unexpected decision was not merely an act of defiance, but a rejection of a violent destiny, a choice to break free from the endless cycle of retribution. His resolve was a beacon, signaling that true strength lay in the courage to choose a different path. Finally, as Sergei sank to his knees, burdened by the enormity of his miscalculation, he accepted that his destiny was sealed. With a final, shuddering breath, he recognized that the indomitable spirit of the Takeda heir had doomed him. In the quiet aftermath, as darkness gave way to an uncertain light, Ryuji emerged not only as a survivor, but as a harbinger of hope, a living testament to the power of choice over inevitable violence. Standing in the lingering silence of that final moment, Ryuji surveyed the shattered remnants of the conflict with a calm that belied the storm he had endured. Every scar and every bruise served as a reminder of the painful cost of survival and the choices that had defined his path. In his eyes burned a resolve to forge a future free from the chains of past vendettas, to embrace a destiny that was his own. As the remnants of fear faded into the background, he stepped forward, his spirit unyielding, ready to write a new chapter that would redefine honor and hope with unwavering determination. Under the early light of a breaking dawn, the stage was set for a confrontation that would decide the fates of both man and legacy. In a deserted courtyard littered with remnants of earlier conflict, Ryuji Takeda and Sergei Petrov finally stood face to face. The air was thick with tension, every heartbeat echoing the promise of imminent violence. For years, their paths had been destined to cross, each step leading to this inevitable clash. Sergei's voice, rough and trembling with a mix of desperation and lingering regret, broke the silence. "Ryuji, let us speak," he pleaded, his tone laced with a fragile hope for negotiation. "There is still a chance to end this without further bloodshed. We can find a way to resolve our differences." But his words fell on deaf ears. Ryuji's eyes, hardened by hardship and steeled by the legacy of his lineage, revealed that no plea could sway his resolve. Every scar and every lesson had taught him that mercy had no place in this final reckoning. Without warning, Ryuji launched himself forward in a burst of calculated fury. His movements were a perfect synthesis of refined Yakuza martial techniques and the raw instinctive power of his personal struggle. With each fluid motion, he unleashed a barrage of precise strikes that cut through the still air. Sergei, caught in the maelstrom of Ryuji's assault, responded with a desperate counterattack. His style was aggressive and unpolished, fueled by fear and the desire to survive rather than any disciplined art. The clash of their combat created a violent symphony in the quiet courtyard. The sound of fists colliding with flesh, the sharp exhale of exertion, and the steady rhythm of combat blended into a relentless cadence. Ryuji's technique was marked by deliberate precision. Every punch and kick was executed with the cold certainty of a warrior who had long trained for this moment. In contrast, Sergei's responses were erratic, his strikes wild attempts to reclaim control from an adversary who seemed almost unstoppable. As the duel intensified, the world around them faded into insignificance. Every fiber of Ryuji's being was focused on this singular confrontation. The courtyard, bathed in the muted glow of dawn, became a crucible where honor, revenge, and destiny were forged anew. Each exchange of blows was more than mere physical combat. It was a dialogue of wills, a contest where the spirit of a storied family clashed with the desperate struggle for redemption. Sergei, growing increasingly frantic under the weight of Ryuji's relentless assault, attempted once more to divert the battle toward negotiation. "I have nothing left to offer but peace," he shouted, his voice cracking under the strain of battle and despair. Yet Ryuji's response was a swift, unyielding counter, a combination of a deft sidestep and a powerful strike that sent Sergei staggering. The balance of power shifted, as Ryuji's calculated aggression left no margin for compromise. The duel raged on with an intensity that defied the stillness of the early morning. Each move was a testament to the years of training, the countless sacrifices made in the shadow of a formidable legacy. Ryuji's every action spoke of a man determined to carve his own destiny, one where honor was not surrendered to the whims of fate or the machinations of the past. Sergei's every desperate swing, in contrast, echoed the tragic futility of a man clinging to a hope that had long since faded. In this final, brutal exchange, the clash of their ideologies was as palpable as the physical blows exchanged. Ryuji's calculated strikes embodied a rejection of the cycle of violence that had claimed so many lives before him, while Sergei's raw aggression represented a final, futile grasp at redemption. The confrontation, fierce and uncompromising, left little doubt that this was not merely a battle of bodies but a war of souls. As the duel reached its apex, Ryuji's resolve hardened into steely determination. Each parry, each retaliatory strike was a deliberate declaration that there could be no turning back. In that charged moment, the destiny of both men was sealed by their own wills, and the courtyard bore witness to a conflict that would echo through the annals of time. Just as Ryuji's brutal duel with Sergei reached its fevered climax, an unexpected presence altered the course of destiny. Hiroshi Takeda, Ryuji's stoic father and the formidable head of the Yakuza, emerged silently onto the blood-stained courtyard. His commanding aura and measured gaze immediately quelled the chaos as his loyal operatives formed a tight perimeter around the combatants. Sergei, his face contorted with pain and disbelief, sank to one knee, clutching his injured side while his eyes darted desperately between the two figures. In that suspended moment, Ryuji's fury wavered as he locked eyes with his father. The unspoken communication conveyed both an affirmation of the Takeda legacy and a solemn warning that the cycle of violence was about to change. Standing over his vanquished foe, Ryuji's hand trembled near his weapon, poised to deliver a final lethal blow. Yet, the weight of his father's silent nod and his own inner resolve compelled him to reconsider. As swift death might bring closure, Ryuji thought, but living with unrelenting terror is a punishment far crueler. With deliberate calm, he lowered his arm, sparing Sergei from immediate execution. The defeated Russian's eyes widened in shock as he realized that his fate was now sealed not by death, but by the endless torment of fear. Around them, the gathered operatives absorbed the gravity of Ryuji's decision. Hiroshi's presence affirmed that true retribution need not be bloodier. Sometimes, the lasting agony of constant dread was the ultimate penalty. In that profound silence, a new chapter of retribution was written, a declaration that honor and restraint could redefine vengeance and that the legacy of the Takeda name would forever transform the art of punishment. In that final moment, as the dawn's light crept over the horizon, destiny was altered, marking a turning point in their fates. In the aftermath of the fierce battle, the Yakuza eliminated the remaining Russian gang. Hiroshi Takeda offered his son a respected place by his side, yet Ryuji declined. He chose his own path, determined to forge a future free from the shadow of endless retribution. Scarred by violence and burdened with legacy, Ryuji returned to Japan, where memories of honor and pain intertwined. Just as peace seemed near, a sudden phone call shattered the calm. "Ryuji, we have a problem," it whispered, promising new challenges. Thus, his journey continues, forever marked by unwavering duty, resilience, and the enduring Takeda legacy.